Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 354, Why You Should Grow Your Own Food with James Marin.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk with James Marin about poop. Okay, maybe we did talk a shiitake ton about human and animal feces, but really we were talking about why you should grow your own food and a little bit about how to do that as well. James was on the show a few months ago on episode 346 with his beautiful and smart wife, Dahlia. They were talking about leaky gut and SIBO, but since he wears an environmental nutritionist hat as well, and he really does have a big love for gardening, we wanted to bring him back on the show to tell us about the benefits of growing your own food. We talk about why this is important for your body and what you need to know about making your own compost and when to eat the bounty after harvesting. Even if you don't have a big outdoor space, you're still going to be able to get lots of takeaways on growing your own food indoors.
James is a holistic registered dietitian, co-founder of Your Gut Connection, and co-founder of the Institute of Plant-Based Medicine. He specializes in using whole plant foods as a form of medical nutrition therapy. James has used his knowledge of food and the environment to help hundreds of his patients prevent and reverse diseases like gastritis, colitis, Crohn's disease, and so many more. His approach takes into account transgenerational factors, stress, nutrition habits, environment, and work-life balance to come up with a tailored approach for each of his patients. This is such a cool show. We talked a lot about funny things outside in the garden, and we really think you're going to have some great takeaways. So share this out with any of your green thumb friends or people that just are interested in growing their own food.
If you have preschool children or school-age children at home like we do right now, you're probably struggling to find the balance between child-led play and school kind of structure. And our kids are not responding very well to really school structure at home right now. So we need to engage them in different ways to have them learn, to have them interact, to have them build skills without them really feeling like they're at school or we're trying to do something unnatural. So our Yummy Foods activity book has come in handy for us and a lot of other people out there. So you can go ahead and click the link in the show notes, click the shop on planttrainers.com, or just go to amazon.com or amazon.ca and you could order it right then and there. It'll be at your house in just a couple of days and you will be able to have your children have fun, learn, and even take part in the recipes.
And now for a moment of gratitude.
I'm grateful that we took the time to create the Yummy Foods activity book for kids because I really saw it as a tool for the plant-based community. But lately we've been doing some online work with more local groups, and we are now getting that book into the hands of people who aren't plant-based. And I love how that's going to make a difference in their children's lives and eating habits.
I'm grateful for the sprouting of our garlics in the front. I planted those back in October and they're starting to pop out of the earth, which is super cool.
They're really cute.
It's super cool. I'm so excited.
James Marin, welcome back to the Plant Trainers Podcast.
Thank you for having me back. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. We did say when we had you on a couple of months ago that we wanted to get you back on as soon as possible to talk about planting and growing and all of those good things because you are the man. You know what's going on. So before we get into that, do you have a moment of gratitude to share with us again?
Yes, man. I am just so grateful for my family, I would say. I mean, this is a time we're all kind of really huddled with our family or those in our household, right? Those in our family unit of a home, and just spending more time with them and taking time with my wife and my daughter and spending that time. I'm just so grateful for that.
It's really amazing how more people could start to recognize the importance of the family nucleus and how important it is to really spend time and get to know each other on a deeper and different level than we're used to.
Oh, yeah. And just kind of slowing down a little bit. I know it's not ideal circumstances, but I guess it is that silver lining and just, getting to know your family a little bit more, enjoying them every second of every day. I think it's so special. Yeah.
Enjoying them most seconds of most days.
Most seconds of most days.
Most seconds of
doing
most.
our best.
Exactly. Have you had any time, I know that you're still running telesessions with your clients and things like that. Have you had any time to go out into the garden, do some planting, anything like that?
For sure. And let me preface this with, I've always been a gardener. I'd probably say my whole life. And I remember as a young child, it was probably my grandfather, so my mom's dad, who really got me into gardening. I have memories of just being this little kid climbing his fig tree. He had the most amazing fig tree, and just eating the figs just right off the tree, to where you'd see sap coming out of them because they were so sweet. Being in his garden, seeing him grow zucchini and tomatoes and the lemon trees and the lime trees. And so, my garden is not as big as his. Mine is fairly small, and we're always growing in it though. We have something called the garden tower, which is a kind of a vertical garden. So even right now, it's rainy and kind of cold here in Southern California, but my strawberries are growing. Our kale is doing amazing. Cilantro is bursting at the seams.
Say that again. Cilantro.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not cilantro. I wish it was cilantro. Cilantro is more of a seasonal herb, but it's parsley. So we're making lots of tabbouleh and stuff like that because we have so much parsley. And that's going to seed. My daughter's growing garlic, our moringa tree. So we have lots going on. We have 2 different types of spinach. I have a fig tree going, so we have about 4 figs on there right now. It's still up and going. We visit it every day. We spend time. We meditate in our garden every day when it's not raining right now. But we're always in the garden for sure.
That's beautiful. The joys of SoCo.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can't grow that kind of food up in Toronto. You don't see lemon trees in our backyard or avocados
but
or figs.
We do have a plum tree. We actually used to have 2 plum trees. I needed to take one down. Now, plum trees, I don't know if all fruit trees are like this, but they're a blessing and a curse at the same time. They are abundant with fruit, and I find that we're on kind of on a 2-year cycle with it. Every second year we get an abundance, and every other year it's kind of But if you don't pick it, and you don't pick up from it, it makes a mess. It stains your grass. It calls the animals. It stinks. The bees and wasps start coming. You've really got to maintain it and take care of it.
Yeah, the trees will show you the ecosystem that's hiding around you. The raccoons and the possums and the rats and the rodents. For sure, they'll come out to play. But that's the beauty of it. I think, I am more fond of trees and what's called perennials. So these are plants that take care of themselves. I love that. I'm a lazy gardener for the most part. So perennials are my jam. Our ideal home is going to just be full of fruit trees. And essentially what you could do, and this goes to an ideal way of gardening, is just a lazy lasagna gardening, where you just sweep everything that falls to the base of the tree and cover it with mulch, and it'll just compost itself. And as long as you cover it, the animals won't really get to it. You won't really get too many rodents or too many, possums or other animals you really don't want. And not to say you don't want these animals, but just an abundance of these animals can be annoying. But that's where you just kind of layer it, lasagna it, and let it kind of feed the tree for next season.
That's so much better than what I do. I go out with surgical gloves and I pick up these half-eaten plums, and it's disgusting and it stinks and I'm getting stung and all of the rest. So that is a really, really great tip there. Now, I know that we have this problem, and that I'm pretty sure some of the other listeners have this problem. What is this black? It looks like poop on the branches, but I know it's not. I know it's some kind of mold or bacteria or something. What is growing on my fruit tree?
Oh man, it could be a variety of things. So one of the really cool areas of research I'm getting into, because, for the most part, here at our clinic and what we do, we specialize in the gut microbiome. We specialize in gut health. But, I do carry the hat of environmental nutritionist. So I know a lot of things about the environment. I'm an avid gardener, composter, and where these kind of intersect is the idea of fungi and viruses and bacteria, because there are viruses that affect our trees, our bell peppers, our cantaloupes, all of our food. So there's viral components to food, and it could be negative. For the most part, they're positive. And it really comes to a nutrient imbalance. And it's much like humans, right? If we have a nutrient imbalance, if we're lacking certain nutrients, we've done damage to our gut microbiome, but then certain viruses or certain bacteria, certain fungi will kind of take advantage, right? So they'll overgrow, they'll cause problems, they'll cause disease within our body. It's very similar to a fruit or tree or whatever kind of plant. They'll start to develop issues as well. So it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not much of a horticulturist, expert or arborist, but I mean, it could be a number of things. It could be maybe you have some slugs. They kind of will leave like a black or brown kind of film, or once it dries up, it almost looks like it's a little hardened as well. So maybe you just have a slug issue as well, or you could have a little virus on the tree. I would say overall it's nothing to worry about. Kind of the shotgun approach is, like I said, that mulching and that composting at the base of the tree, which kind of ensures the tree is getting tons of nutrients. So that's kind of a simple way to go about it. But yeah, I think, and something cool on that note is that when these trees or these fruits do have a virus, they do interact with our gut microbiome. So they've found in stool samples viruses that are known in plants to be in our human stool samples. And so that's really cool to me.
You mentioned the gut microbiome, so I should mention that you and Dahlia were on episode 346 of the Plant Trainers podcast talking about leaky gut and SIBO. So for any of our listeners who didn't get that first round, they should go back to episode 346 and have a listen. And I guess what we wanted to talk about today was the environmental nutritionist aspect of things. And the big question that we left with last time and moving into today is really why people should be growing their own food and how that food that they grow themselves can really help their body more than perhaps the food that they're getting from the stores.
Well, yeah, and so a couple points with that is just you have the control, you have that input, and then you get that output right away. So you're cutting out vast amounts of middlemen, right? When you're relying on food systems that are maybe outsourcing, and depending where you live, so especially in colder climates, you're relying on us here in Southern California, or in California and Florida and Texas, or Mexico and South America. So by the time your food is actually picked to the time it actually gets to your mouth to chew can be a very long time. And in this very long time, we've come up with smart ways to make sure that food stays good. And I'm doing air quotes here for those that aren't watching. So it looks pretty, right? And so this is where we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit, where we're selectively breeding plants and types of food, not for their health benefits, but so they can last longer in containers, in boxes, in shipping containers going over vast amounts of oceans, or if we're flying some foods in, or however we're shipping these foods, we're picking foods based on how they look and how they package, not on their nutrient, balance, not on their polyphenols, right? Not on their phytonutrients. And so when you grow your food, your seed, so for example, I've had a basil plant that I've had for, oh my gosh, it's going on 10 years. Wow. And so basil is an annual. And so like I mentioned before, perennial is something that will just stay, right? A fig tree is a perennial. What else? My Mexican tree spinach, my moringa tree, those are perennials. It's always going to be alive as long as I take care of it. With an annual, it'll die, right? So if I let it go to seed, it'll seed, I can collect the seed, the plant dies, and then I replant the seed to grow it again. Now, what's really cool, or go ahead.
Sorry, what does it mean, let it go to seed?
Right, so letting it go to seed is essentially allowing the plant to seed, which tells the plant to then die. So this is basically when a plant flowers. So for example, my parsley is going to seed right now. So my beautiful, huge parsley plant that is doing so well, it's eventually going to die, or we're going to try and eat it up as much as possible. Then we'll mulch the rest, and I'm going to save the seeds. Then I'm going to grow a new parsley plant next season. Mm-hmm. But what's really cool is this parsley, these new seeds, these are the babies now, and mama has adapted to my environment. So this whole time this plant is creating seeds, these seeds are now better suited to my environment, to my backyard. This is based on inputs. So this is one aspect of plants being alive that we don't really think about, is plants, just like us, are collecting data from the way the wind hits them to what's in the air to what's in the soil, and it passes that information on to its seeds. This is the idea of selective breeding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. So if your plant has adapted to your environment, has your microbiome over the last 10 years adapted to your plant, and therefore you're going to thrive more by eating from your own plant than the plant from the grocery store?
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I would say so.
I think I need a degree on my wall now. Yeah.
Right? I mean, you got it, but it makes so much sense, right? So there is research on this. It's not as specific. So a lot of this is somewhat theoretical, but there's a lot of research where it's like, wow, that does make sense. That is the logical conclusion. And that's kind of the idea. And now I even have a theory, and this is where we get a little more theoretical, but where we've really shied away from in terms of composting, right? And even where we get grossed out in terms of composting our own human feces. And so really that's the way we should be going. Like the idea of using freshwater toilets is ridiculous. It's in terms of science, it makes no sense, right? Because we're basically polluting our fresh water. We're also losing the benefit of our feces and our urine. So if you look at fertilizers that we're using, synthetic fertilizers in modern agriculture, they're made up of nitrates, they're made up of potassium, they're made up of phosphorus, right? If you look at our feces and our urine, they're made up of those big inputs as well. But on top of that, you have our microbes, right? They come with our microbiome. Our urine also has other trace elements to it. These are perfect inputs to grow food, okay? They just have to be. Now, where we run into trouble is if a person is on antibiotics, they are very toxic because, they're exposed to plastic and different heavy metals and, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want that in your feces and your urine. But in general, healthy person, I would say compost your poo and your pee. I bet you guys didn't think we were going to go there, but...
Listen, James, I'm so happy you did, because now I won't have to unclog toilets anymore, because my kids and my wife are going to be pooping in the backyard to grow our own food through our own feces. That's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing.
That wasn't my takeaway. My takeaway is that I don't need to clean the toilet bowls anymore because the dirt on the toilet bowls is actually supporting our body. That's what I took away. Is that true?
Oh, no.
Not the dirt on the toilet. No. You don't want to do that. But
take that diploma down.
Yeah, you lost your diploma.
Just wanted to pop in here and remind you about our Easy Recipes for Busy Parents e-cookbook, where we help you to really get meals done for a whole week. Make sure that we overlap ingredients so that you don't have to go out buying a crazy amount of ingredients that you're never going to use again. And the recipes are pretty simple, and children aren't scared of them when they're trying them out for the first time. So if you want to get that, you could click the link in the show notes or pop over to planttrainers.com/shop and check out our Easy Recipe for Busy Parents cookbook. And now back to the show.
No, look, there's a mechanism of safety here, right? So what's going to make your feces and urine, inert, right, and take away kind of that danger to it will be the soil microbes. It will be that compost pile. So yeah, you definitely want to you don't want to just take your pee for the most part and just massively dump it all over your lawn, or take all your poo and just throw it in your backyard. You have to make it inert and put it into a compost pile, let the microbes do their thing, and then at the end of it, you have beautiful soil, essentially. And then that goes into your garden. I'm not doing that right now. I just want to make it clear.
Maybe we won't do that.
No,
What's
so
the next
I'm going to assume that most people won't be doing that. And so when they want to prepare their soil, what's the best way for them to, what kind of soil should they be using, or how do they prepare it so that they could best grow the foods in their climate and environment that they want to grow?
Right. So the best way, and what we are doing, is basically composting our food. So our food scraps, right? So any of your plant food scraps, you could do eggshells as well. You don't want to do any meat. So any like leftover fish pieces or fat from like your steak or chicken or whatever. I mean, I know some of your listeners probably are eating these foods. Most aren't. But so most of you eating a more plant-based diet or eating lots of plants, you have, the peel of a mango, your banana peel, your avocado skin. That is going to go into your compost pile. You maybe have leaves from your tree, or maybe you mow the lawn, or if you have some paper bags from the grocery store, that's going to go in your compost pile. These are inputs that are going to support it's like a multivitamin worth of nutrients and microbes into your garden. So that is the main constituent of what you want to use to grow food. And then, other forms of, getting a nice organic potting soil, if you want to buy that from your local, Home Depot or whatever, a hardware store. But as long as it's organic, the reason why I emphasize organic potting soil is you're not getting synthetic inputs into that potting soil. It's vigorously tested, so you're not getting any runoff or any heavy metals, or, organic standard is very, very important because it eliminates that synthetic category. So that's important. Yeah.
I just want to go back to that compost thing for a second. So now
Yeah.
do people just take their plant leftovers, put it into a bin, and do they leave it for a certain amount of time, or do they just throw it out into their backyard right away?
Yeah, so it will take some time. So essentially, your compost bin should be well aerated. So essentially, you could get a trash can. You could use, people will use wood as well, because wood is very aerated. You're getting those seams of air going in, and it can breathe. So whatever allows it to breathe and be manageable for you. I'm very lazy. So what's really cool is my garden tower came with a compost in the center. So where I grow my food, in the center of it composts my food as well. And I use a worm composting. So there's different types of composting you can do. You can do essentially worm, you can do no insect input, and you can do grub composting as well. Grub composting is really cool. We can talk about that. But more so for the plant foods, you can even do a pile. Like if you have a big enough space or yard, you could just leave it on a pile. And as long as you're covering it, though, with the browns, what we say, so whether it's paper or leaves or dead grass shavings, or ground up pieces of wood, even like wood pulp or sawdust, as long as you're covering it so the mice and other animals don't want to go in there and eat the leftover scraps, you could just leave it on a pile on your lawn. But typically, and what most people can do, whether you live in a condo or house or an apartment, is get a little trash bin. You can drill holes into it, and that way it's breathing. And so you're just going to layer. So for every amount of, let's say, fresh, food scraps you put in there, you want to put roughly equal amount of paper or sawdust or leaves to cover it up. And you just layer and layer and layer. And over time, so given about maybe like a season, so maybe 3 to 4 months rotation, you'll then get soil out of that. Yeah.
Can I buy some kind of liquid on Amazon instead?
Liquid?
Like, is there some kind of thing can you buy it on Amazon instead? Is there something where you don't have to do it yourself, but it will be just as good, or something that you could add to the soil the organic soil you've already bought, just to bump up the nutrients in it, for the people who are kind of like, I want that, but I'm not willing to go there?
Oh yeah, totally. Like there are like worm casings and like this, essentially what it's called is compost soup. So it is the liquid runoff of your compost. And you have these growers who have literally tons of compost, So what they'll do is they'll collect the liquid and probably sell you that online to some extent. So there are tons of products out there. I would say, yeah, they would be good. You're definitely going to spend a lot more than doing it yourself, but that's something you could totally do. So I would say as long as it's organic or from an organic grower, whether it's kind of a liquid formulation from their own runoff from the compost, or if it's an actual, you can literally buy someone's compost, right? You can buy bags of organic compost that someone's done already for you and just add that to your garden. That's readily available. So those are great.
So for people that want to eat foods that have the most nutrient value, they want to be planting their own seeds. And would you say the seeds that they purchase, if they're buying them, they should be organic seeds as well, putting into organic soil, right?
Yeah, for the most part. And what I like to do is emphasize like heirloom varieties. So heirloom varieties are great. Also, if you have a friend or at the farmer's market, would be a great source to buy seedlings. So whether, at the farmer's market, you'll usually find someone selling plants. Sometimes they even sell the seeds, but most of the time they're selling the seedlings of a plant seed they've already started. And so typically at your farmer's market, wherever you are, you're talking about a farmer that came from maybe about like a 20-mile radius or so. So those are seeds and those are plants that have adapted to your fairly local environment. So those would be great because you can ensure, wow, this farmer is growing it. This farmer has been selling these plants here at this nursery or at this farmer's market for some time. Then you have a better chance of that plant doing well, as opposed to someone in South America who has all these seeds and then is selling them in North America, and you might not have, those seeds germinate like they should, or it might be a little bit harder for those seeds to acclimate. But
or
yeah, I say
a big box store.
Or a big box store, yeah, where they could even be getting the seeds from China, where they're just you're talking like pennies on the dollar, and they're selling you a pack of seeds for like $6.99. And they spent 6 cents, because it's coming from China. So yeah, your seeds matter. On top of that, some of these seeds that aren't organic can be coated already in a pesticide. And the thought there is like, oh, the seed will be better, right? The seed will be healthier with a pesticide, but it's really not. So yeah, I mean, overall organic, it's not perfect, but it's your best bet. If you're seeing certified organic seed, another word I think for safe seed is heirloom. So if you're seeing heirloom variety of seeds, those are usually 2 safe kind of words that you can look for when you're buying seeds or plants.
So what happens when you've put in the effort to make good soil, you've put in the effort to get good seeds, and then, they get dug up because a squirrel is planting a piece of bread in your planter, or raccoons left poop all over the lawn? Like, I'm scared to plant in my yard now because we have so much raccoon poop. Last summer I went out with an N95 mask to clean up all the poop. We don't have a very big yard, to clean up all the poop in our yard from all the raccoons, and it could be quite dangerous, and they could have all kinds of diseases. So if he has pooped in the area where I wanted to plant, or I planted in an area and then I find poop, can I still eat it? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, and look, poo is kind of everywhere, right? I mean, when you really think about all the birds and rodents and animals that can poo in your backyard, I mean, what's really cool is if you get some sunlight in your area, a lot of the UV rays will make a lot of those viruses or bacteria that could be potentially dangerous fairly inert. So I'm not saying just go out there and eat everything and don't wash it, but when you're factoring the sun, when you're factoring it being outdoors, right, in the sun, but then also bringing in, let's say if a bird did poo all over your, whatever you're growing, or you're finding some animal droppings here and there, washing it down. And then washing your produce. This is where washing your produce is very important, or whatever you're growing in your backyard, because you don't know, what animal's been around there or who's been doing what in your garden. But like baking soda is really great. So baking soda with water and washing your produce is really important. But I think going back to kind of what you were saying, I mean, animals are going to eat some of your bounty. Animals are going to be active and alive. I mean, that is the beautiful ecology happening. So when you plan to grow, especially if you're growing in a fairly large backyard or in an area where there's other diverse animal life, expect a good percentage of your bounty to be like a sacrifice, right? We call it like a nature sacrifice, right? Okay, I'm feeding some of the birds. I'm feeding some of the local squirrels. I'm feeding some of the local raccoons, and you kind of plan for that. That's nature taking its little gift, right? But what you could do to prevent that is building some infrastructure. So if you really want to get growing, you're like, I really want to start my raised bed. So the reason why raised beds are so popular is that will divert about 40% of these little critters. So animals are lazy. Keep that in mind, right? That's where we get our inherent laziness from. We want to do what's the easiest. If a little mouse or rat is faced with like a towering wall of wood to them, right, like in a raised bed, they're going to go, I could get that. I'm just going to look for something easier, and they'll kind of go away. So that's where raised beds help. And so you're diverting some of that, some of those wildlife. But then, fence. And then this is where we kind of get into the more permaculture aspect. Permaculture meaning, systems working with one another. So this is where, depending where you want to grow, what you could do is grow deterrents. So things like onions and things like peppermint, things like garlic. So really those pungent, and there's even some other flowers that give off smells that certain animals don't like. So this is where you create a natural plant barrier on the outside and then keep all the goodies on the inside, right? Your bell peppers and carrots and zucchini. And then you got this natural plant deterrent on the outside. So little key, tweaks you can do that are really cool in the permaculture world, where you're not having to use all these chemical deterrents or pesticides or rodenticides to keep your rodent population down. It's like nature has the solution for you. You just have to look for it.
That's great. For the people that don't have those backyards to plant in, I know you mentioned you have a tower. What are your thoughts on people growing things indoors in pots or using some form of hydroponics at home?
Yeah, I mean, from my research, I would say 80% of my backyard is a planter garden. So I do have a lot of my plants are in planters. They're not directly connected in the ground. But then I do have, 20%. So I have some other plants that are connected into the ground that I've planted in the ground. So yeah, planter garden's great. As far as growing indoors, that can get a little tricky. There's very few, with herbs, and there's very few house plants that are actually edible that you could grow indoors. So it would mainly be outdoor. Let's say if you have a patio or if you have a bright spot in your house, you could do a little planter garden there. Hydroponic, I have mixed feelings about hydroponic. So hydroponic is essentially plants grown in a water, and then you're adding a solution, a nutrient solution. So it really just depends on that nutrient solution, right? I'm kind of more of a fan of aquaponics. So aquaponics is essentially kind of gets more to that permaculture aspect of cycles helping one another, where with aquaponics, you're having fish and plants in this synergistic ecosystem, right? And so basically the fish's poo will feed the plants. I kind of like that. And of course, I'm 100% plant-based. I wouldn't necessarily eat the fish, but I would have them there to feed my plants and eat the plants and leave the fish alone. Others eat the fish and eat the plants. And that's fine too, if that's what they want to do. So I would prefer an aquaponic rather than a hydroponic. Again, if you have a smaller space, and there are hydroponic systems that can fit in a small space, I would probably say go with more of a planter garden or do a garden tower. It'd be easier, it'd probably be less expensive, and things are less likely to break on you. But yeah, there's just so many options out there. Yeah.
So once you've grown these and you pick them, how long do we really have until we should be eating them? Should we be putting it straight on the table that night? Because if you've put in all this effort, you don't want the nutrients to just come out into the air. Right.
And not necessarily it would come out to air, but definitely you get the benefit. And there's even some growers that I follow that practice eating straight from the plant, which is really funny, getting it the freshest possible. But so for example, with our kale, we have about 4, and I planted 2 more, so pretty soon we'll have 6 kale plants, because I want a whole kale army of plants where I could use them almost every day. Right now we have to be a little sparing because they're still growing. We probably pick our kale at least once a week, where we get a good bunch of kale and we use it in a big smoothie or we'll juice it. But definitely I'm going to pick that kale the day or that morning I'm using that kale, ideally. Every once in a while, my daughter picks too much. She gets overexcited and picks our chard a little too much, and we'll store it in the fridge. And what's interesting is I find stuff from our garden lasts a lot less than stuff I'm buying from the grocery store. This goes back to the variety and the DNA of these plants, right? So stuff from the grocery store, those growers have been selectively breeding these plants to last longer. Whereas mine, stuff from the garden, it's not really bred that way. So I even noticed kale from the grocery store versus my kale, after 3 days in the fridge, my kale looks a lot more wilted and it's not doing so well than the other kale. So typically, your garden produce, I pick it the day I'm going to eat it, or literally that hour I'm going to eat it. And it's really convenient, because if you don't want to pick it, that's fine. It'll just chill there in your garden. It'll be ready for you when you're ready. So I love that.
If somebody else doesn't get to it first, I could totally see Adam making a Plant Trainers TikTok of the kids eating all the vegetables without even picking it, just with their mouths, right?
Oh my, yeah. I mean, I would say that's one of the problems we've had is like our daughter, before we had a community garden where we used to live, and I would take my daughter there and nothing would really come back home. She would just eat all of our tomatoes right there. We used to grow grapes. We had raspberries. I mean, for the most part, it would all be gone. She would just be full. Like that was her lunch.
That's how our kids learned how to eat chives, because they would go to the community garden and they'd say, come on, try it. And it wasn't the parents saying, come on, try it. And they just started eating chives straight out of their garden. And now we make the chives at home and they love cutting it for when we need it for recipes or dinners or what have you. But they'll just be outside and they'll just pick it and eat it right there. Yeah. But chives grow like weeds, so it's great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. And it's such a focal point, like with our daughter who's 5 years old and her friends, before the whole COVID-19 stuff, when her friends would come over, she'd go, let me show you my garden. And they'd go out there and her friends would try kale and they would try our chard, or they would pick a strawberry and eat it. And they're so excited to see strawberries growing, like, oh, that's so cool. And they would try new foods that they maybe wouldn't try. Moringa, which is really high in protein and really a high source of antioxidant. Our daughter Layla is so proud of, like, look, I'm eating a tree. Like she pretends, look, I'm eating leaves. And her friends are going, what are you doing? And then she's telling them, no, it's moringa, try some, and they like it, So it's just such a cool, like, focal point in our home and for especially our daughter and for her friends to try these new foods. Yeah,
it's a beautiful experience to get into the gardening, and for people listening that have the opportunity to do that, highly recommend you give it a try. Even if you start with something small, don't go and do a whole garden at once, but dabble in it and figure it out and have fun with it. That's awesome information, James. Thanks so much for sharing. If people want to reach out to you to get a bit more information or connect, where would you like them to go?
Oh, yeah. You can go to marriedtohealth.com. You can follow us on Instagram. We're Married to Health. And through there, you'll see all our other connections. So we're good friends with other farmers. So I have to shout out Farmer Rishi and Zero Waste Farmer. If you guys want to follow them, they're on Instagram as well. They're where I learned my knowledge from. They are the experts, like, at an amazing level, doing this at such a high level. Like, they are urban gardeners. They are changing the game in terms of where we get our food. So yeah, definitely give them a follow. But that's where you can find me.
Very cool, James. Thanks so much for being with us here on the Plant Trainers podcast. We appreciate having you back again.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it really helps other people find us, just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.